All right, so this will be the video for the foreshortening drawing that you're going to be doing using charcoal. So first off, what is foreshortening? This is the definition, and we'll look at some examples of what it actually is. It's a visual effect or an optical illusion that causes an object to appear shorter than it actually is because it is angled toward the viewer. If all that sounds kind of gobbly-goopy, I can explain what that means here. So it's this. It's that our brains see this and we understand that this person, even though he is quite a bit smaller physically, if I were to measure from here to here than his shoe, because it's an optical illusion, there's perspective. It works in our brains, right? It makes sense. Or you can see the finger and the hand, like this is as big as, the kid's entire head. That's what we're looking at. It's taking the distance that is normally pretty long, let's say this woman's arm, and shrinking it down quite a bit. So like the length from her armpit to her wrist is about the same from her forefinger. Or you could see on the same would be true for the woman's leg here and her entire body compared to the size of her feet. So that's what we're looking at. And oftentimes what we have to do is we kind of have to turn like off our brains to make this work. We just have to draw what we see and make it work that way. So and we do this all the time, just to not like as an extreme example. So foreshortening is just straight up linear perspective. So if we were to say this cube, like this box, right, is the same size. Here's the actual width. This line, our brains say that this is a cube because this line makes sense going to the vanishing point, so it looks like a box. But if you were to measure from here to here, it's quite a bit shorter than if you were to go from this corner to this corner. So we do this. It's just that we have to kind of go further with it, I guess. So same with the cylinder, same thing showing, right? If we were to actually take that distance and then lay it on its side, you can see it starts to shrink down. In our head, it still makes sense. And it's just 1 point perspective. So when I was in college, this is the way that we were taught to do it, is to break down the human body into different forms. So the shoulder, the elbow, and the wrist, you can see these are spheres. We have some type of cylindrical type object, maybe cones, all the way down with the fingers. And that way we'll still practice that way. Um, and I'll show you another way to do it, but it's just a way to kind of be able to break it down and see. So you'd say, okay, from the shoulder, how far is this distance to the elbow? Then you'd make your cylinder that far. And then once you have it all put together, you add, the skin and all the details back to it. Just another example of foreshortened here. Oh, this is a fairly famous painting. This is one of the first times that in Western art, at least, that we've found has a really extreme foreshortened view. And it was to do with Christianity and having this is Jesus laying and having those wounds on his hands and feet up front close to the viewer. So they laid this entire person down to try to make it look like they're really close to you. But again, if you look at the lines, here's the edge of the bed. It is, again, it's 1 point perspective. Here we go. So we need to turn off our brains and use our eyes to see what's actually in front of us. Just draw what you see. I know it's kind of redundant at this point, but don't draw what you think is there. Draw what is actually there, right? So here's a paper towel. No, it's not really, it's just a towel, I guess. It's rolled up. This cardboard piece is the same. It's the same image, just turned. But if we were to take a red line and measure it, you see how it starts to get shorter? And the same is true for when we do portraits. So many of us are fairly used to doing portraits, but if I were to measure from the corner of my nose to my ear, there's my red line, and then it gets foreshortened in perspective, and I would draw it smaller, right? We do this a lot already. So what I'll have you do is start to practice some of those shapes. Oh, this part. I'll have you practice some of the shapes on the packet that you will receive. This was me thinking, oh, I'm gonna try and make make a packet with just my arm. So I asked my wife to take my picture, and it was me extending my arm. So you would have to draw me, but it looks like this is the face, like what happens to you before you're murdered. I don't know what I did, but it's like truly scary. So we're not gonna use that. The packet that I gave you here is the first page of this man. So I want you to physically draw on top of the man on his arm, and I just want you to start to put down the different shapes. right? Break them down, cylinder, sphere, some type of trapezoid with cylinders going into it. And from there, transfer what you see down below it. So just draw the exact same thing down below it, and then start to connect it and add the detail back. That way, everything you saw from, let's see if we can go back to the man's body here, right? All that detail will be foreshortened for you by using this. It's just using the little shape method to break it down. Again, that's how I learned in college. I think it's a good way to approach it if you're new to foreshortening. All right, now that you've watched that link and practiced with the other packet, here are the project requirements. Is that you must compose and take the photo. So we're not going to go online. I want you to physically take the photo. It doesn't have to be in school, but the human form should be the focus. Okay. So then once you have that, send it to me. We're trying to have some type of story with it. And you can make up the story completely, but try to have your model, whomever you're drawing, could be you, and someone take your photo, I suppose. That's fine too. But have some type of story with it. Make the foreshortening extremely easily identified. So really push that foreshortening just like we practiced in class. Compose to your strengths. If hands are hard, don't do hands. You don't like doing heads, don't do those, right? So you can play with it and make it work for you. Make the image tell a story. You can use items to help tell that story. You're gonna have to have a background with this, so make sure you have that. And these are going to be on a fairly large paper, 18 by 24. Image should fill most of the paper. You can choose to grid it if you like. It's not required, but again, proportions, that could be another way we approach this foreshortening. Charcoal is going to be used to complete the project, and your goal is to still use a full value scale, push and pull your values to make things look realistic. So just some other ideas of what foreshortening could mean. And you could say like, okay, that's a pretty like, there's some story there. I'm not sure what it is. Why it's like balloons on a railroad track. She's reaching out. I'm not sure what that would be, but that's up to you to decide what your story will be. This is kind of interesting perspective, changing it a little bit. And then, of course, your rubric for this project. So if you still have questions, if you're not understanding one of the packets, if you need help, just reach out, let me know. I'm here to help. Thanks.